Welcome to the regular session meeting of the Acton Agua Dulce Unified School District Board of Trustees for September 10th, 2020. We're going to reconvene the regular meeting at 7:31. There's people out there working every day. Every time something changes, we have to have a new agreement with new signatures and something like that. And that's a very dynamic process, and it's one that's required. But I know everybody is out there working with signatures on papers or not, and I very much appreciate that. There are people that are thinking outside the box. I mean, there's nothing worse than having your kids sit at the table and they turn around and look at me like I'm your teacher. No, I'm not your teacher. And I think you miss your teacher a lot if you're in my house. But I think that there's some people on this technology team, and I'll hold off on that a second. But there's people that are thinking outside of the box and reaching out and making themselves available. There's phone calls coming in after hours. People are doing what they can do to make a difference at the individual level. Some of us aren't very computer tech. We're not computer techs. We barely can open up an email, but it's very rewarding to have someone sit you down as an adult and walk you through something, and then you are able to look at a technology that's been on your computer for 15 years that you didn't even know existed, like maybe voice to text, where someone is having a problem writing or speaking or whatever there is, and you've got somebody that's showing them a simple accommodation that's really life-changing, but they think it's just a normal everyday thing. And there are people out there touching people's lives. Do you know what I mean, Mrs. Lapp? Wink, wink. And Mrs. Chun, this is no surprise to me. Mrs. Chun was talking to me about stuff like this 10 years ago, but before I even knew what it was. I'm very impressed with that map linked data set, because in my world of trees, we keep records on trees. I analyze tree populations. I look at data attributes and pull them up, and they're all visually arrayed, and I can tell about things that only I can understand. But it's very simple to look at. I know where Meadowlark is. I know if I click on that room, and then all of the stuff is automatically arrayed for you. This is something that should go on with or without COVID. So I'm very impressed. Mrs. Chun, I've been impressed with you for more than a decade. And I want to give a shout out to Acton Agua Dulce News, because they've been showcasing some teachers and some people that are making a difference. We all make a difference. But guys over there, I think I just gave you 2 hints, LEPP and CHUN. Did you catch that? If not, you can call me. Country Journal, Lillian, I love it that you are online now. I love it that we can access your journal online. And I think one of the strengths of your paper is that you've always been able to take the documents that we get, the plans, the reentry plans, all those things, and you publish them verbatim so people can understand what they are and what they mean and go right to the source. And I very much appreciate that. I pay a lot of attention to details. So Country Journal and Acton Agua Dulce News, I want to thank you. You are critical in putting the district's message out right now, and thank you for being positive, because it's very easy to be negative right now, and that's all I have. Thank you. I have a couple of things to say here. First off, it always struck me that it's either health or gym class or PE. It's never this thing where you understand why you're running and why you don't eat donuts and why bacon isn't the best thing for you 24/7. It's kind of like, I always thought there should be a personal finance class, so when you get your first credit card, you don't go out and buy 50 Metallica CDs and then wonder why you don't have the credit score to buy a house. So there's some very simple things here. I think that this has been a matter that some people in the past didn't really want to jump onto because of these controversial things that we're talking about. Tim, this is your initiative. I appreciate it very much. You had the courage, and Principal Brockway, I work in a governmental environment where, you know, you can talk donut talk all day and there's nothing in the middle. So I appreciate your candor and your ability to work with a very sensitive subject here. This is where I am a believer in liaisons. I've called for liaisons on the board in the past and not had good luck with that. But this is an opportunity where you have people on the board who understand and have practical experience. Not only do they have practical experience, they understand the obligations, the law, and they also might be smart enough to understand if this is an area that you're looking to save money in, you might be finding yourself, the cheaper it is, the more controversial it is, and the less you have. And it's kind of like, I'll compare this to like teaching distance learning. Some teachers don't prefer that, but they're being forced into it. I don't want to find a newer teacher looking at a bunch of 12th grade seniors that are making a travesty out of something that's delicate to talk about. I think the intent, I don't want to speak for Coach Jorgensen, but I don't think the same drugs that we had on the table at the party in 1974 are the same ones that they have now. I think the vaping, the behaviors, I don't think that we're looking to introduce what we do in privacy or to make fun or give people ammo of which kid opted out of the class or something. But again, I think there's a perfect opportunity here to appoint a board liaison of two people I know as a president who I would appoint immediately. But again, I've not seen support for that from the board. Unless y'all chirp in right now and say, hey, yeah, I would be interested in that, or we want to wait for Mr. Fox to come back and be vocal about my suggestion. But I think we have two people on the board that would serve as a perfect liaison for this and help us use their professional experience as both educators, health teacher, someone who's had health curriculum, and kind of at least give staff some guidance and support. I don't want to find 6 months from now when we buy a book that's cheap or piece something together with a bunch of printouts off of a Xerox machine and have the community all freaked out because we're, you know, introducing one thing or another. I want kids to know you don't bully kids, you don't do dope, you don't get hooked up on stuff, you don't burn your lungs out, and pay attention to what you're doing in gym class and make it meaningful. And I think that that's really the intent here. So I'm going to loop back around now so y'all can rip apart what I just said. As a student rep, what you just said was very, very important because along with Mr. Roque, the younger people, this is about you. It's not about how freaked out I'm going to get because they say something they didn't say 40 years ago. So I very much appreciate that, and I think it's an important part of your role here, Mr. Fairbanks. Thank you, and I'll close with reminding everyone we've beat this to death. When staff comes forward with the recommendation, I want everybody to remember their comments tonight. So if we don't need a liaison, that means we don't need a quasi-liaison where we're kind of halfway through the process as board members jumping in and getting freaked out. So Mr. Brockway and Superintendent King, you've heard the majority of your board tell you tonight that I think Tim's initiative is supported by the board. It has been for a while. We've been waiting for a while. You hear our concerns, but the focus here is to update the standard health information where people are aware of the dangers that could come to them and not get off into the world of controversy. So that said, I will not be asking for a liaison, and we'll let the staff do their job and do it well and not second guess them along the process. Thank you. Thank you, Larry. So what I'm going to do is they're going to be read into the record. I'm going to ask staff, were these posted in their entirety onto the district website when the agenda was posted this Monday?
Yes, they were.
So any and all of these reports and changes regarding any number of things were there. So if you have an interest in that, and you have questions, this is a time where you would read through that and then you would contact the district office with your questions. It's always best if you have a specific question about a board policy, because these are board policies. A lot of people may be under the impression that the five of us are a quasi-legislative body, and we are to some extent. There's something called local control that the people upstairs, Big Brother, doesn't mess with. When it comes to our town, we do have some rights. But at the same time, they are board policies, which means that there are constraints. And within the civility statement, you see that there's something that says, understand district policies and procedures. And that's what that means. We don't just do whatever we want. There's a lot of law and policy behind the decisions we make, and those things are there to protect people. So if you have any questions about something you read and you're doing your background here, contact the district office. You are free. I always tell people, when you send 5 board members a complaint, if they all respond, you violated the Brown Act, and then it becomes more about people not talking to each other than actually addressing your problem and responding. It may be good practice to send the board president and the superintendent an email and say, hey, I have a question about board policy X and whatever. Chances are I will read those comments into the record if you ask those questions, and that's where our comments come from. I think there's some level of competence that's required on the superintendent's level to maintain a standard of operation that is in line with state and local policies, especially with the county and the state of California. So, on my end, a couple of things here. First off, this was kind of a situation where it doesn't matter if you're Long Beach Unified and you have zillions of students, or you're someone like us, because you still have to have the plan. You still have to have all elements of the plan. And there were some things that were being negotiated, and this was like herding cats and trying to get this together. I appreciate that. A couple of things of clarification. The parent groups per se, PTO, Booster, and PTSO, they were not formal input groups into this process. They exist to promote the interests of the parents and students and sports and things like that, but more so that the site councils for each of the schools and those people that serve on those site councils, and you see a lot of overlap in faces, but it was the site councils and not the parent groups that provided input to here. And the work that the site councils do is very important, because it acts as a liaison to inform administration and facility considerations at each site, and then staff can take that and put it together collectively. So get that into the record that it was the site councils that did the work and not the parent groups. And then when it comes to the Title I kids, ELAC and DLAC exist as federally mandated public liaison groups, because wherever you have federal funding, there has to be some watchdog ability for people who receive those services to actually give input as to whether they're effective or not. And that all that information ends up loading back into the LCAP plan. So outside of those two little clarifications, I always want to make sure that we don't get the people that are selling T-shirts at the volleyball game being pinned down with some policy that the district adopts that they may not agree with. So those separations aside, great work, teams. For that question, did everyone hear that? $60 a day to educate a child in this district. $60 a day. Think about that. I know people that spend more than that a day at Starbucks. In the civility statement, there's something about knowing the district's business and limitations. So that said, let's pull up the part where the slide, please. It says budget assumptions, and then we're going to start with general fund alignments. Let's start with that one. It's towards the front end of it.
Probably slide 2 or 3.
There it is. Now, I want everyone to look at this because the LCAP document, what the LCAP document does is it takes input from, again, the site councils, ELAC, DLAC, and all these other people, and it holds staff accountable to state and local standards. So if I'm coming along and saying, I want this, and you guys should be paying attention to this, if our staff, again, Long Beach Unified, LA Unified, they have all these documents, and our staff has to produce them as well. So throw in this 4-month process along with the reentry plan and all this, and you've got administrators that are busy doing these kinds of things. But I want everyone to look at this, goals 1 through 7. That is what's mandated by either the state or LACO specific to our district and what we are supposed to do measurably. So if I call up and I'm freaked out about one issue with one kid, chances are that issue is captured in here somewhere and it's a broader level. So if you're critical or you're putting your name on a sign between now and November, spend some time looking at this because it's important to the district of the business, and ultimately how the state and LACO fund us and what their expectation of us is and what their scores are. So that's it. Let's go on to the budget assumptions. I think it's the next page. Now, is that enrollment current? The answer is no. And it's substantially lower now. So this will change going into out years, okay? Now I want to talk about charter oversight administrative fees. We know that that number is not going to be at 3%. We know that in San Diego County, the Valiant case is seeking to have us pay back money that we've collected. And we know that some local charters are going to seek reductions in facility fees. So there will be substantial decreases in that into the future. Lynn deals with the finances in the hand she is dealt. And the oversight agency that looks over her work is LACO, Los Angeles County Office of Education, and ultimately the state. So there's some pretty steep eyes looking at the work she produces. I will tell you that the only reason we are here today right now is because of the very conservative way that Lynn and with the support of Superintendent King have stifled down unnecessary expenditures. So when we're asking, why don't we build this? Why don't we do this? Why don't we buy that? There's reasons, and if you want to participate, I can understand people being critical, but understand what the realities are, what these people do, and what they're measured against. And it's really important that if you're going to be very critical about something the district is doing, at least understand the parameters and what staff is focused on, what they're mandated to be focused on. That said, great job. I very much appreciate that you're able to do this and speak to it with such ease and transparency while you're also trying to figure out what other documents that are 30 pages long that pop up every week, a new one, and do that as well. So thank you, staff.